Another episode of Critical Hits is here.
Yeah.
And maybe even 2 a week if we end up doing what you were thinking of
doing. Yeah, hopefully 2 a week. What is up, y'all? What is up? How's it going?
So, this week we are doing another game from the PS1 era.
And another one
that's sort of near and dear to my heart. But maybe not too many people probably played this one.
You never know.
So I'm going to be doing Legend of Mana today.
See, that is one that I've never played.
Mm-hmm.
I was a big PS1, PS2 kid, but I've never played or heard of Legend of Mana.
So I think it probably started around the Super Nintendo era. I don't think there was anything before that. There was the Secret of Mana game.
Okay.
And then there was what was technically Secret of Mana 2, but
yeah.
I don't know if it ever got an official release in the West. And so that game was always listed as Seiken Densetsu 3 in Japan.
Okay.
And so it was actually like the third game in the series, but it was Secret of Mana 2. Yeah.
It
was a little odd. But then we come to PlayStation 1. And Square releases in June of 2000 Legend of Mana. Well, I think it was actually the end of 99 or early 2000 in Japan, and then June in the US or in the West.
It's crazy to think.
And so this is, from the very basics of it, it's an action role-playing game. It's not one of those like turn-based battle type games like old Final Fantasies or even to a degree Chrono Trigger and Cross and those types of games. This one is actually completely active, and the Secret of Mana series has pretty much always been that way. Even in the original Secret of Mana, you were running around with your swords and fighting monsters just on the map, that sort of thing. So you end up with, like, you're just running through an area, a dungeon, a map area, whatever, and then monsters will just, like, jump out at you, and you can, in the original Secret of Mana, it was basically just your characters would pull their weapons, and then you'd fight. In this one, it's more like not break away, cut from the screen, go into a battle or anything like that, but stuff stops, the enemies get in their position, and your characters pull their weapons, and then you start moving around in sort of a three-dimensional space fighting. So you would have mostly like left and right, almost like old beat-em-up type games, and then your character would be able to go sort of back and forward rather than like up or down.
So was it kind of Binding of Isaac and Undertale style-esque bullet hell movement? Like moving in that circle around? No,
if you're going to think about the battle mechanics in a game like Legend of Mana, you want to think of old like beat-em-up style games.
Okay.
Your characters will go like back and forward in like the background and stuff, and then they move left and right, and so they would be like standing up, and then you just like go back and attack this enemy, and I'm going to come up here and
like
attack
the X-Men
this
arcade
one,
game.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, just like old beat-em-up style games.
Very cool. Is it crazy to think that was 19 years ago? 19 years ago.
That happens sometimes in general when
just
people talk to me about, well, I was a kid when such and such came out, and I'm like, I was in college when that came out. And so whenever I hear like, that was 19 years ago, I was like, yeah, it doesn't feel like it.
Doesn't feel like it, man.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's so fresh in your mind, too. And even the ones that you forget, because we... a buddy here at the station, we won't name names, but he gave us a lot of ROM hacks to games. And me and Steven started going through this list, and my God, the names that were coming up, it's like you forget these names. And was Legend of Mana on the PS1?
Legend
ROM
of Mana
hacks that he had?
Might have been on there. I can't remember if Legend of Mana was there. May or may not have been.
But he had like PS1, N64, SNES, and it's like...
I remember the big one that we ended up finding was Pirates of Dark Water. There was a game.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. That game was terrible. And you're like, what is that? I'm like, that's an old TV show. An old like kids...
It lasted like one season,
sort of
didn't
kids show. It was like one season long, and it wasn't very good, but I loved it.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was like terrible in the best possible ways, Yeah. One of those things.
Yeah.
Like the same reason that people go and watch like B movies.
Oh,
it's terrible, but I love it.
It's like Sharknado, the Sharknado effect. Yeah,
that sort of stuff.
Love it.
It was interesting and not a great series. Not terrible sort of thing like that, you know?
Yeah.
It was okay, but it wasn't very good, and I don't think many people watched it.
Well, you know.
But
so, question for you: how many? I kind of want to prep a couple questions for you every time you have the show, just to like keep you on your toes. But roughly, if you can remember, I don't know if you can, but roughly how many hours did you put into this bad boy, this game?
Legend of Mana?
Legend of Mana. Roughly. I mean, obviously you can't remember an exact number, but like if you had to put a finger on it, like how many hours did you put in this?
60, maybe 80, something like that.
Not a bad amount.
I've played sections of Legend of Mana a few times, though. I don't remember if I ever actually reached the complete end. I know what the whole game is and the ending and all that. I don't remember if I ever actually reached it myself, though.
Really?
So
that's interesting.
Well, one of the great things about this game is just the idea that you hear a lot of times people are like, well, no two playthroughs of such and such will ever be the same, especially in the days of roguelikes and that sort of stuff.
For sure.
But this is very early on, game-wise. This is 2000, and it had a couple of introductions of mechanics in it that were really interesting and in a lot of ways kind of really ahead of their time. And so the big ones are simpler one first. It had a very early version of like multiplayer game, like local co-op multiplayer.
Very cool.
All right, so this is not like, oh, we're going to go here, split screen, I'm going to play with someone. No, you're sitting on the same chair, couch, whatever together, and you have two controllers plugged in. And so throughout the course of the game, you're playing as one character, the hero of the story, whatever. But as you go along, at different points in the game, different characters, NPCs in the world, will join you during different quests. And whoever's in the second controller, those will either be AI controlled to fight alongside you, or whoever has the second controller will control those characters.
Very cool.
With the other option being, and this is the part where it didn't work extremely well, because whenever you didn't have like an actual character from the game traveling along with you, you could have it set up in such a way that the other person has their own save file with their own character, and you go to this one location in this one town and you click on something and it lets you like bring that character into the game.
Interesting.
And so theoretically that works really well, and functionally that does actually work pretty well, except that you're like, oh, I'm going to take the male character, because at the beginning of the game you can choose male or female, and your name and what weapons you want to use, all that sort of stuff, right? So I'll have the male character, and then like my little sibling or my friend has a female character in their own game, or even a male character in their own game, whatever. And we're going to bring that character in, and we're going to play the game together. And then as soon as you hit one of the story elements where someone joins your party, they boot the other character out, and they take over that other NPC instead, right? So you couldn't just like keep that person with their character in your game playing alongside you. And so that was interesting, but didn't work extremely well. It functioned for what it was supposed to be, but it didn't quite aspire to be what I think players might have wanted from it.
Yeah.
Right? And then the other one is that, in theory at least, no two full-on maps that you're playing the game in, like overworld maps, will actually be the same.
Okay.
Because you have this, when you very first like start the game, you have this big map, this really big map, and it's mostly empty. It's almost like just an outline of kind of a continent and some oceans off to the side and stuff like that.
Okay.
But then when you look at that, it asks you to choose an area.
Oh.
And so you go through that map and you choose an area that's maybe, I think it was about 1/4 the size of the whole map.
Oh.
It might have been even smaller than that, like 1/9 or something like that.
Dang.
And so you choose a section. You're like, well, I want to be down here on this part of the continent with some ocean over here, or I want to be here in the main area where there's no water, or over here, whatever. That doesn't affect it too much. It mostly affects where you can build your world map.
Yeah.
Because just on the like concept of this game is all of the Mana games have to do with what they call the Mana tree, which is this tree that brings like life and magic and all this stuff to the world, right?
Okay.
So, like, the mana tree was destroyed, and there was a big war for what little mana, magic power, basically, was left in the world. And this is all long before the game started. And at the end of it all, the world was sort of saved by, like, encapsulating areas of the world in what are known as artifacts and sort of sealing them all away is the only way it could really be saved. And so when you start the game, you only start with your character's home, and you plop that down wherever you want in the map that you've, in the area of the map that you've selected. And then as you go through the game, you pick up artifacts along the course of the story or side quests, things of that sort. And then you choose where on the map you want to place these artifacts. And that chooses where that area of the world now is. So it ends up being this really big and really complex system where, say, the first couple of artifacts you get will unlock the first starter town and then the first, like, adventure area, which is kind of like a dungeon, but you're not inside, you're out just like on a highway or whatever, that sort of thing. And I decide I want to put the first town right north of my starter home, and I do believe you had to connect the pieces. They couldn't just be off on their own. You'd had to, like, build out.
Okay.
And then I decide I want to put the highway area, the first adventure area, to the north of the town. And so I ended up with, like, my home, and then the first town, and then the highway.
Okay.
Like that. So in the mono world, the magic is split up into various elements, and you get your 4 normal elements: fire, wind, water, earth, all that stuff. And then in the mono games, they'll often incorporate other sorts of elements. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 8. In the different mana games, and usually they encompass things like wood, spirit, light, and dark. So similarities, but some different things. And as you place the artifacts, where you place the artifacts and how you place them affects, like, the way that the different elements are affecting the artifacts you're placing. So I placed mine that way. Now, for those first 3, it'll probably be very similar. Say you place the first town to the west of your home, and then you decide to place the highway to the south of your home, not even touching the town itself. So our layouts are very different. For those first 3, it probably won't be very different. They'll probably play pretty similar. But each time you place one of those, it sort of increases how much one element is affecting, like, the other pieces that are touching it. And as you build that up as you go through the game, it can very drastically change things. You'll usually get pretty similar dungeons, pretty similar towns, story-wise, that sort of stuff. It's not like a roguelike, really. But a lot of things like what enemies you can encounter there, what sort of elements will affect them, or will they try to use against you. And especially one of the big ones that led a lot of people to, like, read a guide about perfect placement of artifacts way back in the day, long before it was really just easy to Google whatever and figure it out. Trying to figure out what the perfect placement of artifacts would be is if you affect, like, certain late game towns that you don't get till way later. If you have certain elements affecting them in certain ways, you can end up having, like, very rare, powerful items just in the shop. So they might be expensive, but you can just go there and buy them, whereas I, who didn't affect them that way or whatever, would have to go to one of the later game dungeons and fight a certain monster to try and farm that resource, whatever. Things like that.
So, with all of this, do you think this mechanic, this sort of taking puzzle pieces, connecting them together, and working them to affect each different individual piece and stuff like that, do you think that could work in today's gaming age? Honestly. Like, if you took the mechanics of that game and basically said, here's the graphics and the story of a game today, and I'm like, do you honestly think that this could work? You know? Like, do you think it would still be a fun concept, or do you think because of the area that it came out, and because things have built better on it, do you think it was just kind of like a leave it there, it was good then, keep that mechanic there?
I think it would need to be refined and changed a little for these days, but I think a concept like that could very much work.
Really?
Especially these days where we're very into the big open world games. Having the ability to sort of build that world out in different ways on your own.
That also presents the problem of we're so used to open world games, bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, they're getting bigger and they're bigger. They're getting more open world and open world. Do you think that with this puzzle piece sort of concept, with how, with how vast it can be, and with how okay you were back then with, limited variability.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously a very variety-based game, but with the programming that we had, we could only put so much variety into, the monsters will be different, but they're not going to be so different that if I put my puzzle piece here and you put two of yours there, they're not going to be extremely different, but they are going to be different.
No, there might be a couple of differences.
Exactly.
They've used some different attacks, things like that.
Do you think that people will expect too much from a concept like this?
I think in this day and age, we can actually provide a lot more from a concept like that. As for people expecting too much, my bigger worry, which I don't think would be too bad this day and age, like I said, where you can just Google and find out whatever about whatever game. My bigger worry would be people who don't bother to look at information on the game, going in and seeing that their big open world is actually really small and being like, this is boring, and not realizing they can even build onto it.
Yeah, and that's why I posed the question, because of how high the expectations are in society today as far as gaming, especially video gaming.
Yeah,
I feel like it would be a both good and bad thing, in my opinion, if you put out this concept today. Because, one, people are going to expect so much from it. That's going to put a lot of pressure on developers, a lot of pressure on people that have played the game before or have played games similar to this. It doesn't have to be from the Mana series, but still, if I put out a steampunk version of this same thing, and it's a completely different game, but it has the exact same concept, I also think it could be extremely successful, because with the ideas that you're presenting in my head and with the limited variation of, you can only do so much with this, so much with that. PS1 only has so much technology.
Yeah.
But with that much variation, I could easily pour in 150, 200 hours into that kind of game, because there's so much variation, there's so much scaling, and there's so much nuanced content. But also, if I ever got bored with my 200 hours of gameplay, I could restart and basically play a completely different game.
Yeah, that was one of the big reasons why I have played Legend of Mana the first however many hours a number of different times.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm going to place this one here, go here, do this, start this storyline, do this side quest instead. It's like
Skyrim times 20.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not
Give me
quite where Skyrim is, but yeah, that's exactly what I was about to go for. Is it's kind of like an early version of Skyrim, where it's, I don't care about the main story. I'm going to go off and do this side quest with this weird rabbit who's greedy and wants me to help him start up a business and is constantly trying to cheat me out of money and stuff.
But that's what I'm saying, is a lot of people, when they tell you, and I'm using Skyrim because it's a game that I love and I know very well, so I know what I'm talking about as far as this. But a lot of people, when they play Skyrim, not everybody, but a lot of people, the minute they get out, they're off to the left. They have their straightforward path of, hey, here's the storyline. It's like, I'm going to turn to the hard left and go completely clockwise around it.
You immediately ignore that person and walk away.
Until I'm level 75 and I kill it, and it's not the most important thing in my life right now. You know? So with a game like this, I feel like something similar could be happening, and it's a matter of, people love side quests. People love going off of the norm, and if this puzzle piece idea, because it sounds like a really cool concept just for the PlayStation 1, but if they grabbed this and took it, I think people would basically be reverting back to, oh, you played Legend of Mana? I played a completely different game, because what you're telling me sounds nothing like what I did. I walked through mine and started a business. You fought your way through yours and killed a dragon? It's oh yeah, because I
also
put
in
my
this
puzzle
day and
piece in a
age,
different
they
place.
would probably tie how difficult the monsters are, from how far away from your starting point you are.
Yeah.
So you'd probably get those people who are completionists and challenging themselves, being like, I'm going to build all of my sections of my world in one direction as far as I can, and see how far I can get before the monsters destroy me.
Another thing I didn't even think about. Twitch streamers would eat that stuff up, man.
You could have them playing it almost like a roguelike.
Yeah, and
they'd be building off in like one direction and facing different monsters. And if you go this way, you face different monsters, or this way, different ones, and they just get harder and harder until they just can't beat them.
Or
anymore.
like for those YouTube creators, like if you gave me, what I'm picturing is like, this may not be how it is in Legend of Mana, but the reason I'm so stuck on this is because the concept sounds so amazing. So they give me a blank slate, right? Here's this big blank circle, and my house is dead in the center. Right? And I basically build out and branch out to like discover new things. Kind of roughly what it is.
Yeah, not circle, square.
I know, but
section of the map, but yeah, that's concept. Pretty much exactly what it is. Your house isn't dead center. Your house is wherever you place it, and then you have to branch out from there.
But you could I totally could see, YouTube players or Twitch streamers like building their channel logo out of their connecting pieces or something. Like, see if I can win by building my channel logo out of my pieces.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, if I wrote out this word, like what kind of monsters would I get or something. or doing the challenges like you said, like it's an RPG, but like there are a lot of challengers out there will be like, how far can I get with only level 1 content and level 1 equipment if I branched out and discovered everything? The possibilities for that, endless. You would be getting so many people buying that video game for you, man.
Yeah.
Just because people love not playing the same thing as other people. Especially in today's day and age. That's why Skyrim is still selling copies. Because if you go to the left and I go to the right, we're going to almost play completely different games for the next 20 hours.
Which is what I love every time you do hear people being like, stop making Skyrim, make something new. And the company's like, well, stop making Skyrim when you stop buying it.
Exactly. And it's like, and people are like, oh, that just goes to show how little, like, people care or the companies care about, their story or whatever. That's not it. They're a company, man. 1, they're out to make money. And 2, clearly you don't hate the story because you're still going and buying it. Yeah. It's not like people are stopping buying it because they hate the story. That's when development companies start making new games, when people stop loving it.
Yep.
And people haven't stopped loving Skyrim. Yeah. It's not out of lack of hate and like, oh, this thing's going to make us money forever, leave it alone. It's like, we did a great thing and people aren't bored of it yet and the story's still good, so keep playing it. Let's not waste our time and energy on something that people don't want to get rid of yet. Because for a fact that when Skyrim came out, people were still playing Oblivion.
Yeah.
And for a fact when the next Elder Scrolls come out, people are still going to play Skyrim. Because that's just how it works.
People are still playing Morrowind.
Yeah, people playing ESO. It's a great universe, and that's what I'm saying about Legend of Mana with a big concept like that, because I don't know about game development, but in PlayStation 1 era, it was obviously extremely hard to make games still just because of the technology that you had on hand. But I'm pretty sure that they had big concepts like that because they could draw so much back from the graphics,
Yeah.
They're drawing so much because I can basically just draw a little sprite and have it go somewhere instead of people expecting me to draw a full-fledged human with like flowing long locks going and fighting these monsters that basically look like they could have come out of the ground 3 feet from my house.
Yeah.
Realism is not the issue. It's here's our concept, here's our game. Like we've said before in many of our episodes, like here's our concept, here's our game. Let's not worry about how it looks. Let's get the story out of the way and our concept out of the way and see if that works. And now, today, with the technology we have, I mean, again, I don't know how hard game development is, but if you can make a game like Skyrim or Grand Theft Auto 5, where each minute, like, corner of the world and each piece, or like Red Dead Redemption 2, like you can make each individual little point, like a 30-mile radius, I think you can get away with a concept like that game.
Yeah, probably.
And with that, and with how good, different dungeon crawlers are, with randomizing and for lack of me knowing other good ones, but like games like Minecraft, where they make trillions of blocks in a random world just by putting in data somewhere.
Yeah.
You can make so many good quality variations that literally give you an in-depth different experience every time you place a different puzzle piece together. That's crazy. That is such a cool concept. I love it. I'm sorry.
And leaving our listeners to think of that, we will go to our first block of music. And this is going to be pretty much the intro section of the game. So we start with Legend of Mana, which is the theme on the title screen of the game. Then we go into Where the Heart Resides, which is the theme of your character's home where they start. To World of Mana, which is the theme that plays when you're on the big over map, deciding where you want to place artifacts and things like that. And then we move into Traveler's Road, which is the theme of Luon Highway, which is the big, like, first adventure area where you'll fight monsters and things of that sort.
Very cool.
So we will be back right after that.
That was very epic.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah, so we have nice sort of intro to it, and that's really nice and fun, and then you get to like the home theme, and it's just sort of really soft, and the map theme, nice and really soft, really background while you're messing around with the artifacts and figuring out exactly where you want to play stuff, and then straight into Luan Highway where we get like battle themes and that sort of stuff.
Love it.
So one of the big things that I forgot to talk about before we went on our first break is one thing of why I think you'll love this music. Guess who the composer is?
Don't tell me. Should I name a game they're from? Like a game they composed for?
Go ahead.
Final Fantasy.
I think she might have done some Final Fantasy.
Kingdom Hearts?
Yes.
Yes! Score!
Yoko Shimomura.
Wow.
Composed
that's
for
cool.
Legend of Mana.
Wow. That's crazy.
And so you actually do end up with a lot of songs here in this game, which can be seen as almost like prototypes for stuff she did in like Kingdom Hearts, cool. That sort of stuff.
I also wonder, like, how long has this person been composing music for video games?
Recently.
Since about this age? About this era?
No, earlier than this, because this was 2000. I think I saw a couple of titles going back as far as the mid-'80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a seasoned vet.
Uh-huh.
Wow. And then to, that's got to be so interesting, especially as a musical composer, but specifically as a musical composer for video games. Like, you can't go in expecting every game to be a slap, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Legend of Mana, amazing game, but nowhere near the prestige and, the elevated status of Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
But I wonder if she went in there thinking that this was some of her best work. And then...
From my understanding...
7-8 years later, she's still making slaps for great games? What a power hitter.
From my understanding, and I don't know if it was extremely recently, it might have been in the last however many, 5-10 years or something, someone had interviewed her, and she had actually said that the stuff she did in Legend of Mana was some of her favorite stuff that she'd ever done.
Yeah, see, that's especially as an artist, that's got to be...
That sort of most evoked her, basically.
I also think that's just widespread artistry in terms of any artist doing any form of art in the world, because you'll see even YouTubers talk about that kind of stuff, where they'll pour their heart and souls into videos that'll get 10,000 views, and then a joke video they put out because they were bored and had to fill their gap of time get a million. Yeah. And they're like, what is this? Same with art pieces where they'll pour their heart and soul into it for 3 years, and then a 2-month piece that they did just on their off time will get so much more praise. That's so interesting as somebody who's not really an artist. That's such an interesting concept to me.
Never really knowing
what
will get the public's interest.
Yeah, what's going to get the public's interest, because your interest is not the public's.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Legend of Mana, again, probably a clearly awesome game with a cool concept. Didn't get nearly as much praise as Kingdom Hearts. And I'm sure she's proud of both.
Yeah.
Not to get me wrong, don't get me wrong. But I wonder if she has said, oh yeah, maybe in her mind she's thinking, man, Legend of Mana was so much more work, and I'm so much more proud of Legend of Mana, but they just ate up Kingdom Hearts music. And again, it could be just a time and a place thing, with Kingdom Hearts and its gameplay and how it worked, and this
how it somehow managed to take such a weird concept and just work so well.
Exactly. But I just think that's actually a very, very cool fact, because this is a seasoned vet for and does she strictly do video game music? Do you know?
I didn't look to see a whole lot of other stuff. She probably does, but I know her mostly just for video game composing, that sort of stuff. And I imagine that's what she's got to do mostly.
And not to be the guy that's thinking about the money because the artistry is so good, but she has got to be making a pretty penny. Doing this for 40 plus years, then composing on a game like Legend of Mana and then Kingdom Hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got to be on retainer for that kind of stuff,
and
man.
And being pretty much like the sole main composer for Kingdom Hearts for all of the games.
That
in itself has got to be like, I can live on this. My children, my grandchildren, my
can
great-grandchildren
live on this. My grandchildren's grandchildren.
Yeah.
But it's also a matter of finding that style, too. Because, as I said with Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts, as I was guessing, I'm thinking of my mind, like, okay, where am I playing right now? After I just heard that song, what is similar, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And not that it's bad, but you get a style, you know? You get a composition style that you're never going to hear this composer compose a heavy metal song, you know? I mean, for multiple reasons more than one, but that's just, she has a vibe that she's done so good with. And it's how her brain thinks now.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, I can do these chord progressions with these classical strings. And it's just how her brain is clicking music together, and it just keeps working because it's so good.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's a crazy idea.
Honestly, you got to keep expanding as a musician as well. So you'll end up hearing, like, new ideas that she came up with for games that she ends up doing years and years later. New paths they've taken, new theories that you've worked on, that sort of stuff.
People are so set on a single idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is how the game has to be. It can be nothing else, and that is it. And then these game developers are like, why do they still want us to make a side-scrolling platformer? Like, it's 2019. Why would you still want that at all? They're like, bring back Castlevania, but make it like just a 3D side-scroller. It's like, do not do that. That would be a terrible game in 2019.
No. And in this day and age, you end up running into the problem where whenever anything does work, every company latches onto it.
Microtransactions, battle royales.
Yeah.
Every company is latching onto those ideas now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't play battle royales like Fortnite, Apex Legends, or PUBG.
Me either.
But the formula works. I mean, it just works for people right now. It's just a working formula, and one day that formula will die out, whether they want to believe it or not. Like, that's a formula that's going to die out. People are going to get bored of it, just like everything else. And I think people let nostalgia cling to their lives too much, especially nowadays. Like, they're letting it, because if you had a Legend of Mana game come out right now, or a new Mana game come out right now, you wouldn't want it to be this. Legend of Mana is Legend of Mana. It's the same series. You'd want the same characters, you know, or the same storyline and ideas.
Yeah.
But you'd want it in a different format because you're adjusting to the times, as should the company. But if they release literally Legend of Mana like this, with just, like, cooler, like, slightly better textures to make it work, it wouldn't work. I just don't think it would.
No, probably not. Why would anyone who already has it buy it in the first place?
That's what I'm saying, Steven. That's what I'm saying.
So we ended up covering, like, some of the mechanics and the battle mechanics and that sort of stuff, and how you build out the world, that sort of thing. One of the other really interesting parts of Legend of Mana is the idea that most of what you get storyline-wise in this game is what would probably be considered side stories in other games, side quests.
Oh, really?
The storyline in Legend of Mana consists of... It's a little weird. There's one storyline that you have to finish to beat the game. It's considered the end of the game, right? Okay. That's where the credits will roll. You do that, you
get
win
your
the game.
Congratulations-y thing.
But it doesn't require a whole lot to get there.
Oh.
You just need to do as much as you need to do to get the artifact to place down to create the area that you go to face the final boss.
Okay.
And you really don't have to do too much to do that. So a lot of the other stories that surround it are three primary storylines, which are almost completely disjointed from each other. They do connect in some different ways, but nothing like right on the surface.
Yeah.
It's like three complete storylines. And then there's the main area, the main dungeon, the main final boss that you beat for the game that isn't really specifically connected to them either. And then everything else that happens is like a bunch of side quests, it's like watching your character who wasn't like told you have to go and save the world, and just one day sort of decided I'm going to go save the world because why not? Or just sort of
I love it.
Just sort of stumbled into the idea that artifacts can be collected and placed and the world can be rebuilt and that sort of thing. Like, didn't have any specific reason to go and rescue the world.
I love that.
And just sort of did it because, right?
We were
talking
in the break room before the show started, and I was like, "Hey, what game are we doing today?" I was like, Steven goes, "We're doing Legend of Mana. It's a really good game from that I played a lot." And I was like, "I never heard of it." He goes, "Yeah, the hero just kind of saves the world because he's got nothing better to do." I was like, "Oh, really?" And he goes, "Yeah, it doesn't really lead you into anything. You just kind of do it just 'cause."
Yeah, it's of that era of game where there's very little, if any, storyline leading into the gameplay.
It's no backstory. It's just, here you are. Here's the world. Go save it. Have fun with it.
Whenever I end up talking about things like that, I always go back to bad dudes, right? The president has been kidnapped. Are you a bad enough dude to save the president? Boom, cut to gameplay.
Are you a bad enough dude to save the president?
Yeah, it's just one little 2-sentence long dialogue, and then boom, you're in the game.
I love it.
Go do it.
That's so funny.
Right? So no one specifically tasks the character with saving the world. It just sort of stumbles on artifacts, stumbles on this ability, ends up doing so. But I think I've completely lost my train of thought now. Oh, no. In doing so, because of that, a lot of the storyline feels very disjointed in a lot of ways. And not in a bad way. I don't mean this in a bad way.
It's just different.
What I mean is you get a lot of self-contained little, sections of storyline dealing with this NPC or this NPC or this NPC, and you're just sort of dealing with their lives and something they're going through, and you're helping them with whatever.
That's very interesting.
Right?
Would you say it's a very heavily NPC-driven game?
In a lot of ways. Like I said, you have the second player can control the NPCs. You get joined by a bunch. You get joined by this bunny guy that's a trader. It's one of those fantasy-type worlds where you have creatures, demi-humans, things like that, right? Very Final Fantasy-esque or those sorts of things. So you get this guy that's this bunny man who's this trader, this merchant, and he's really underhanded and constantly trying to cheat you and stuff, but he's one of the NPCs that can join your party and even fight alongside you at certain points when you're doing his storyline, where you're helping him expand his business and stuff like that. So you end up with a lot of those completely separate and self-contained story arcs that may go through multiple different artifacts, multiple areas, but are really about this NPCs, this section of their story, and you're helping them do this thing.
For sure.
So throughout the course of the game, the three major arcs, the three major plot lines in the game consists of the fairies arc, which is demons and priestesses and things like that, and then a bunch of fairies getting caught up in this war against humans, and it's really ends up boiling down to kind of this weird love triangle almost sort of thing between people ever since they were kids, ended up causing this big war in this section of the world, between fairies, humans, and all these other beings, right?
It's always
and then you deal and then you deal with Dragon Emperor arc, which is two sibling, what they call dragoons. It's basically warriors that serve dragons, right? And they're on opposite sides of these dragons, warring with each other, trying to become released from what's effectively almost like hell, basically, and get his power back and try and take over the world, and the other one's trying to fight him back and keep him at bay, that sort of stuff. And so you get caught up in the middle of that and end up having to fight against dragons and help these siblings and all that sort of stuff. And then the last one is what's known as the Jumi arc. Jumi being these people that from almost always just look like the normal humans of this world, except that their hearts are actually exposed jewels.
Whoa.
Right? So they actually have these jewels on their chest or whatever, right where their heart would be.
Okay.
And the problem,
very dangerous.
And so the problem is you get Jumis being oftentimes like discriminated against or treated badly. The general idea being that some people do this to sort of dehumanize them, because some people will try and steal the jewels, which just kills the Jumi, and so they try to look at them as like less than people, pretty much, right? And so you end up in this whole arc dealing with trying to like stop a thief and stop jewel thieves who are basically running around killing Jumis, and you end up going to like villages that were supposed to be like Jumi villages, but now they're just like abandoned and overrun by monsters and stuff like that.
Would you do that if you could?
What?
If you could have your heart exposed as a jewel, but you could make it look as cool as you want?
Absolutely not. Because the very next thing that happens is someone wants to steal it.
Not just steal it, but like...
It's like, oh, that's great. It's probably worth a pretty penny. I'm going to take that. I'm going to die. Well, you're not human. I'm going to take it.
Well, not just jewels, not just because it like look cool, but like I think it'd be a bad idea because that's basically just saying, oh, have my heart on the outside of my body instead of
that's
in.
Like every boss in every video game with a big glowing weak point.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, how am I supposed to beat this boss? Oh, look at that big glowing spot on his body.
Oh, he's got a huge diamond on his chest. Let's hit that.
Yeah. Every boss in every game, especially like character action games with these big, bright, glowing weak spots.
You're basically just an endgame boss.
Yeah. And so those are the three major plot lines of the game.
Cool.
Right? So they're the ones that are kind of connected and are the big storylines, and like when you finish them it'll be like this arc complete and give you some like picture, and then it'll cut back to your character like back in his home now, like such and such days later, you know, that sort of thing. I
do.
But the thing is, the only storyline you have to beat the game is the Mana story arc, which is mostly disjointed from all the other three. You just have to get far enough in like any storyline, far enough in the game in progression to a certain area, to a certain point in a certain storyline, that sort of stuff, to pick up the artifact which opens up the Mana tree. Yeah. Which ends up being the big final dungeon, which ends up, you know, you don't really have to do much of any of this, and you can have people who have completely different playthroughs because they only did one arc or they didn't even finish any of them, because all three of these arcs can actually be done simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
You can be working on all three of them at the same time. Like, I went over here and did this part of this story. Well, now I came over here and did this part of the fairy story, and now I'm over here, I'm doing this part. I placed this artifact, and it leads to a section of the Jumi story. And
cool.
Right? And so, yeah, they're really interesting storylines, but people can sort of decide for themselves how much they want to do, or even just completely miss sections because they just didn't realize what they were doing.
It's very ahead of its time.
So...
It's very ahead of its time.
Yeah. And so with that, I think we will go into our second block of music because that deals with the three stories. I picked a song from each of the arcs.
Cool.
Pretty much whichever one I liked from each of the three arcs. So we start out with the Whereabouts of Truth. That's from the Fairy arc, and it's kind of a tragic song about the main characters and this relationship and all this stuff that just went horribly wrong and, you know, caused all this to happen. Then we move into Overlapping Destinies, and that's from the Dragon Emperor arc, and that is... I think that's the final dungeon of the Dragon Emperor arc. If not, I know it's one of the dungeons of the Dragon Emperor arc, and so that's very powerful, very strong, very battle-themed kind of music. And then we move into Ruined Sparkling City, which is the Jumi arc, which again is like this once big, thriving, bustling Jumi city, but now they've all just been killed, harvested, whatever, and now it's just overrun by monsters and ruins, and it's just really, really depressing, this song.
Jesus. Brutal.
Yeah. All right. We will be back right after that.
What up, yo?
Yeah.
We back. That was nice, too.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a good mix of intense and calming.
Yeah. Very depressing songs in a lot of ways in that.
I was going to say that last
in
one.
that chunk, but...
That last one, ooh.
Also nice and calming.
Yeah.
So I had started talking about the final story arc in the part before, and then quickly stopped myself because I realized I wanted to save that for this section, because the next chunk of music we have is all about that final story arc.
So what do we got?
So the final one, and it's the only required story in the entire game, as I said. It's actually called Legend of Mana. And this is the one that...
It's okay. Happens sometimes. Moving along.
This is the one that a lot of the rest of the game felt, like I said, very sort of different, very sort of disjointed, lots of different little stories. So Legend of Mana is the one story arc that feels very similar to previous Mana games, right?
Cool.
It has to deal with the mana tree itself and the magic that it gives to the world and how it affects everything that's going on in the world, that sort of thing, which is the theme that ends up getting use in like a lot of the Mana games. And so you do end up with this story that's very sort of segmented apart and disjointed in a lot of ways, and then suddenly in the very last minute of the game you come back to, oh, this feels like a Mana game.
I love it.
But it is fun, but it's also, like I said, pretty small. I believe it's only one artifact, one dungeon, and there might be multiple bosses in that section, but like one big final boss fight.
So do you like that? That sort of Skyrim-esque, Legend of Mana-esque, finish the main story whenever you want sort of a thing?
Yeah, I do like... Well, I like very guided stories as well, but this idea of here's this big world, go out, do things, play, which brings up a whole other section of the game that I never even got the chance to talk about before, which is in the game, like I said, you can have a second player running NPCs or another party member, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Aside from the NPC, you can also have in your party a third person who is classified as a pet.
Oh.
So throughout the game, you'll pick up different, almost like monster eggs, kind of, that you can then hatch, and then you have this little ranch in your home section. You have whole areas of your home section that are not introduced at the beginning of the game. It's actually the game is actually pretty good at tutorializing people, because it teaches you place the artifacts, go to this place, get into fights, do this, do that, and then it opens up different sections of the home area as you progress further and unlock different things.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
So you get the eggs, and then you learn how to use the ranch area, where you can hatch the eggs, and then the pets will be outside like grazing in the pasture, which will allow them to slowly level up over time, or you can take them out with you to fight alongside you, and they'll level up faster.
Wow. There you go.
And these can be a whole bunch of things. Of course, you get... I don't think this was built into the... I can't remember if this was built into the game itself, or you had to do something special with like another game or another console or something, but you could totally get a chocobo.
Oh, that's cool.
And then there were the usual like Mana creatures, like little rabbits, which are little like blobs with bunny ear things.
That's funny.
And then you got all sorts of different creatures from the game itself, like things that you would encounter as monsters sometimes, and then you would be able to hatch them and have them yourself. And then there was a whole nother section of it, which was like a farm where you could go and give seeds to someone who was living in the area with you. Not like exactly living in your home, but he was on your property or whatever. And he could plant the seeds and farm things and give you items, fruits, vegetables, that sort of stuff from the seeds that I believe you could then give to the creatures to make them stronger, increase stats, that sort of thing.
Dope.
And then there was a whole workshop section. And in the workshop section, you could make something else that would classify as like a pet when you would go adventuring with it, which is golems, which you build out of like weapons and armor.
Yeah.
And then you use other items to create logic blocks. So you create like blocks, and then you're telling the golem what to do, building it in like a circuit almost, and then installing that in the golem. And then the other part of the workshop allowed you to use the mana, the different elements of mana that existed in the world, as well as different resources like different types of wood or metal or things like that, to create magical instruments, which would be like your magical attacks in
dope.
battle.
Cool.
So you would create them, and based on like how rare is the type of wood or metal or whatever that you're building it out of, and that's like how strong is the attack power of it, and like what type of instrument are you making, that determines like what the attack area is of it, the pattern.
Cool.
Like, do you attack in an area or just hit one enemy or that sort of thing?
So this last block of music is about, you said the main actual required story to end the game, yes?
Yeah.
So what blanket statement is going on at this point? Is the tree under attack? Is it like, how is the world being threatened?
At this point is,
how is the world being threatened?
long ago, the mana tree was like destroyed.
Okay.
Right? That's what caused all this war that ended up causing the only solution that what was left of like the mana tree and the beings the beings that supported or were created by the mana tree intended to it and stuff were able to come up with was to split the world up into the artifacts. Was this huge war over what little mana remained in the world.
Okay.
Right? And so you plop this down and end up finding out that like the tree isn't dead, and there's all this corruption going on because of all the war and all the, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's this whole section you have to go through to try and like purify it, pretty much.
Cool.
To try and save the world by purifying the mana tree. And of course, different things happen and different twists and different stuff that you wouldn't expect, but that I'll leave for anyone who wants to play the game of exactly how you go about all this. And beyond that, I think that's pretty much everything about the game, unless you had any last questions.
Honestly, it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, cool concept that I really like. I mean, yeah, it seems really, really cool. I'm a big RPG guy. I love me my RPGs. So anything RPG that we bring on, I'm like about.
Yeah.
Plus, the music seems super cool. Composer of Kingdom Hearts obviously knows what she's doing. So, very cool. Good choice.
Yeah.
I wish I would have played it, but I did not. Wish I did.
Maybe he has it in his list of game ROMs and you can just play it that way.
Please.
I don't remember if he did or not.
That'd be cool.
All right, so we'll jump straight into our third block of music now, which is the whole final story arc. So we start with Sanctuary of Mana, which is the final area. Then Time of Darkness, which is the final boss. And then we have Nostalgic Song, which is the ending theme of that story. Not just like the whole game, but that story arc has its own ending theme. And then we'll come back, say our farewells, and then be out. Yep.
I heard we're back already.
Kind of surprised you with that one, didn't we?
Yeah, I was a little unprepared, but I'm back. Hello.
Oops.
Well, we're back. Well, hello, sir.
Yep. So
that was Legend of Mana.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we're moving into one of the probably the best songs of the whole thing.
Very interesting.
Which is the outro section of it, which is Song of Mana. This is the ending theme, which is really interesting because when you end up playing most video games with songs that have vocals attached to the songs, you usually end up with it being in one of two languages.
Yeah.
English or Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
English for, like, all the West. It's just the most common language, and so that's usually what it goes into. Japanese, of course, because Japan is so big in the video game industry, and they make so many games, so...
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
And you'd expect stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, which makes this one interesting, because I believe it's in Swedish. So I believe it's a Japanese vocalist, right? But she's singing the song in Swedish, so it's very interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah. But I really just love the way this song sounds, which is why I definitely chose the outro of that, and it's the ending theme to the game, so it fits really well as the outro.
Wow, look at us. Look at you.
But, yeah, even in this day and age, Legend of Mana is very fun, very flexible. You can play like however much of whatever stories you want, place the artifacts down however you want.
Love it.
You can give your character like any weapon you want out of a list of like 7 or 8 different types, but then, you know, there's stronger or weaker ones within that type.
Yeah.
Right, and then depending on the weapons you're using, you can unlock different special moves, things of that sort, and then...
Very cool.
You know, get the musical instruments and use magic and bring pets and golems and NPCs and stuff along with you.
Very cool.
So it's a really fun, sort of large series of adventures that you can go on.
I'm a fan.
Yep.
Made a fan out of me.
Very, very fun. And occasionally very, very dark and emotional and messed up. But
I mean, welcome to classic games.
Yeah. Also just a really good game. So that will be it for us. It's another episode of Critical Hits.
So good.
Having covered Legend of Mana today. I have been DJ Keen, and today I was joined by...
DJ B. Millie, that's me.
Yep. And see you guys later.
Thanks for joining us, guys, as always.